So let's close the eyes. Sit up nice and tall. Allow the face to be full of compassion. Allow the breath to be flowing. Feel that every breath you breathe in is a gift. Feel that every breath you breathe out is an offering. Breathing in, receive the gift. Breathing out, make the offering. Have no doubt in your mind that this breath is everything. It is the connection. It is the cause. It is the cure. It is the point. It is also the path. So taking one more breath in and one more breath out, and then drawing the hands together in front of the heart. And together we'll lift our voices in celebration of this breath in one beautiful Om. Breathing in. And bowing the head toward the heart, acknowledging all that is. And draw the face to center, release the hands, and welcome. Good morning. And good morning to everybody on Facebook. We decided this morning we were going to go live, and so Facebook community is watching as well. And I will apologize ahead of time. My voice is a little hoarse. I've been battling a little cold this week or something, and this is the remnants. So hopefully that's not too distracting. This morning I wanted to talk about prana and the relationship of prana to healing. And this, in part, is in the Bhagavad Gita, in part is in the Dhammapada, in part is in the Atharva Veda, in part is in many of the scriptures of yoga and other traditions, Buddhism. And this concept that prana has a direct relationship to our healing. But before we start talking about the prana, I want to talk about healing and what that is, and maybe what it's not. Prana and healing go hand in hand, but just like we constantly take our breath for granted, we take life force for granted, we also take healing for granted. We don't oftentimes take the time to sit down and to consider, what do I mean when I say I want to heal? What is that all about, What do I need to relinquish? What do I need to attain? What do I need to recognize? And what do I need to accept responsibility for? So when we talk about healing, I think the first thing that we can look at is that healing begins when there is a recognition within oneself that you even want to. Healing begins when there is a recognition within oneself that you even want to. And that might even be the most important step or stage in the process of healing. Because if you don't want to heal, you're not going to. Wanting to heal is not just an empty phrase. I just want my life to be happy. I just want things to be okay. I just want to be a better person, a healthier person, a happier person. Those can be very empty words. So even saying I want to heal is not a recognition of an inner impulse to heal. Those words need to be full. They need to have meaning to them. And that meaning needs to come from inquiry. It needs to come from asking ourselves, what does my life look like as a healed environment, as a healed ecology, as a healed space? What do I look like? What do my relationships look like when I am no longer harmful to myself or others? And when we ask ourselves that question, there's an opportunity there that's kind of hard to describe. But basically, the moment that we imagine ourselves as healed, we soften. Like the muscle tension that's not necessary moves away a little bit. May only be a little bit. Maybe almost imperceivable, but it does happen. The breath becomes just a little bit deeper. Our body becomes a little less resistant, and our mind softens just a little bit into humility. But then the ego comes forward and says, you're too good to be humble. Pick that armor back up again. Tighten up. Stand up. Forget this soft, mushy spirituality, healing. Go out in the world and make a name for yourself. That's where your healing lies. Be somebody. Let people know who you are. And don't take no for an answer. And that's where a lot of people are today in the world. They're in this forcing the healing kind of mentality. And it's not going to work. It's not going to work. Because when we try to force something, it comes from the quality of our breath. The quality of our breath becomes tight, resistant. We start to hold our breath in a way that's really harmful to our nervous system, to our physical body, to our mental body, to our intellectual body, and to our happiness body. We look out at the world and we say, I got to force this, man. I got to make this happen. And that's not the way it goes. Instead, we just become defeated and hopeless. We sit back and we say, why is this not working for me? Why is this not going my way? And the answer is very simply because the inquiry did not take place in a way that empowered the heart to continue to open. Humility was overwritten by egotism. And the longing or the impulse to heal was overwritten by the impulse to harm, the impulse to be important, the impulse to force instead of allow. What does that have to do with prana? It has everything to do with prana. Prana is a gift. Prana is an offering. Prana is the essence of life everywhere and in everything. Prana is humble, and it is humility. Prana is the ability to receive and to give completely of oneself without question or concern about what we're getting in exchange for that. Prana is like the sun. The sun shines down upon the earth, and it warms the earth, and it warms us, and it allows the plants to grow, and the harvest to happen, and all these other beautiful things. And never once does it say, and this is something that's shared by teachers throughout the world and throughout time, never once does the sun say, what are you going to give me now? Do you see how important I am? Where's my accolade? Where's my respect? How dare you not recognize my contribution? No. The sun is what we could abstractly consider healed because it gives and receives without expectation, without accolade, without doubt, without hopelessness, without anger without harm. It just does. Harm is something we commit consciously, typically through anger or some other emotion. Harm is something that happens when our emotions are out of whack. And we know that our emotions are out of whack because we cannot give freely or receive freely. Everything that we do, we expect something for. So the first thing that we need to do is commit to an inquiry about what we feel healing is. And then stop and listen. Listen to the heart. Listen to this physical body. Listen, yes, to the mind. Because there is a part of the mind that is very egoic and very distracting, but there's also the part of the mind that is your child. That is you in a child form. That is saying, I want to heal. I want to know that just because I fell down, I'm not a bad person. I want to know that just because I stood up, I'm not a bad person. I want to know just because I spun around, I'm not a bad person. There's that part of the mind that we can associate with the child, which is very confused about its own identification. And as part of that second step of listening, we need to hear that confusion in order to begin to unravel it and allow it to heal into something that is whole, complete, and humble. So the second and third, kind of interrelated, we need to identify our ego. We need to recognize that the ego is going to be there and it's going to be playing games with us all throughout this journey. It's going to be telling us how wrong we are or how right we are. And we do like to hear how right we are. So the ego will pat us on the back and say, you're so good, you're so right. Beef it up a little bit. Come on. You're on a roll, man. Let's go. Let's do this. And then suddenly we lose the capacity to listen to the heart, to listen to the body, to listen to the part of the mind that is genuinely seeking healing. And instead we begin listening to the accolades, the impressions of the ego. Now, when we start paying attention to the physical body, the first thing that we're probably going to notice is the pain, the discomfort. And we may say, I'm too far gone. Damn. Why do I have all this pain, this tightness, these shoulders, these hips? Why is all this happening to me? Why do I have these feelings? And we could begin a judgment game, a game of blame, a game of self-destruction because of the pain we feel. That self-destruction is not really a matter of hating oneself so much as it is a matter of not seeing oneself as worthy of healing or even capable of it. Sometimes people, they come to yoga and they ask questions before they come to class. They say, I don't think I can do that. I'm not very flexible. And I say, well, probably 90 to 95% of the people that I know who have ever practiced yoga didn't start very flexible. Certainly there's a small percentage that do. But most people, when they come to yoga, they don't have the flexibility. They can't put their foot behind their head. They don't even want to. They don't even know it's a possibility. They don't even know. Fortunately, many people stay and check it out. They stay and they accept the invitation to give it a try, to see what the class might hold for them. But some people don't. Some people go convinced that they can't. They don't even know it's an option. Sometimes as yoga teachers, we want to run after that student and kind of be like, wake up. Healing is your birthright. You can do this. But if we do that, then we're forcing. And we're not meant to force others to bend to our will. We're only meant to conduct our own inner inquiry And within that inquiry, be a light unto others. But first and foremost, to be honest with ourselves about our own stuff. So we got to listen for the message that I want to heal. We got to understand what healing is. We have to be aware of the body, aware of the mind, aware of the intellect, aware of the ego, aware of the crazy ramblings and interactions of all these things. And oh my God, isn't that enough? That's like so much. But it just gets deeper, you know. Because maybe you're one of the students who stay in yoga class and all of a sudden you start having epiphanies and you're on your yoga mat in your yin posture and the tears are streaming down the face and you know that it feels right even though you don't want it. It feels right. It feels like, wow, something is happening here and I can't quite put words to it, but it feels like it needs to go or it needs to change or it needs to be acknowledged or something is needed. So I'm just going to stay and continue doing the work. And so you do. You commit yourself to the long run. And maybe that's 5 classes. Maybe it's 10. Maybe it's a year. Maybe it's 10 years. Maybe it's a whole lifetime. For some of us, those moments of initial inquiry open us up to a lifetime of commitment to practice. And as a result of that commitment to practice, we will experience healing on deeper and deeper and deeper levels. And just when we think we've gotten to the deepest level, something will rattle our bones and fluff our feathers. And we will be like, what? I thought I was past that already. I thought I was healed. And the moment that we think we're healed, we need to recognize honestly and openly that thought is the ego. It is the ego elevating us above and beyond the actual place where we are existing. Because we exist in a physical world, in a physical body, where things are constantly changing. Things are becoming healthier and then becoming more sick, and then becoming healthier and then becoming more sick, becoming balanced and then becoming out of balance. That things are always shifting, and the moment that we think we've got something, we actually don't. We've only addressed it on one level, but like every onion that's worth its own skin, there are thousands more to go. So maybe we have addressed our crisis of trauma on a level where we're even willing to look at the potential of healing. But now that healing takes us on a roller coaster ride through every tissue, through every cell, and through every molecule of our being. You know, as a trauma survivor myself, it wasn't enough to just say, I want to heal from this. Yes, that was a pivotal moment in my life experience, was when I said, I'm ready to heal. I want to heal, and I believe I can. That was the easy part, really. Because then I had to go through my whole being and recognize where that trauma touched my heart, my lungs, my thyroid, my parathyroid, my liver, my spleen, my stomach, my intestines, my adrenal glands, my kidneys, my nerves, my veins, my arteries, my spine, my skeleton, my jaw, my mouth, my eyes, my nose, my brain, if I didn't say that already, and the interactions of all of those parts of myself, which were each and every one touched by trauma. I needed to see on some level, even if it's subconscious, and understand how that trauma touched me in that area of myself. And then just when I thought, like, because we tend to go right here first, we'll go to the heart first, and we're like, I know my heart was hit hard, and, now it's clear. No, it's not. Because you haven't even begun to address your adrenal glands. or your spinal column. And that's all physical. That's all the physical stuff. Have you even begun to touch the subtler stuff? How has your life trauma touched your breath? Yeah? And people are like, huh? What do you mean by that? Nothing wrong with my breathing. I breathe the way I've always breathed. No, you don't. None of us breathe the way we've always breathed because none of us have always breathed the same way. When we first came here, a little tiny baby in a crib, most of us belly breathe, which is ideal, diaphragmatic breathing, right? You breathe in, the belly bloats. You breathe out, the belly relaxes back. It's not really a relaxation, it's a contraction, but it's a natural breath, so there's no force to it. But at some point in time, we experienced a little aggravation, a little irritation, a little hyperstimulation, and that breath got changed from a really nice diaphragmatic breathing to something that was a bit higher up and a bit tense, a bit tight, a bit harsh, a bit short, a bit fast, a bit slow, a bit different. And eventually, depending upon how old you are and what kind of trauma you've dealt with in this life, that breath potentially became stuck in some part of your body. And the part of your body that it got stuck in probably relates to an organ or a tissue that was also touched by your trauma. Like your nervous system tissue. Nervous system tissue gets touched by trauma, and suddenly the nervous system is shifted into a pretty regular state of fight or flight or freeze. And the breath for that experience of life is not slow and deep and relaxed. It's rapid and in the upper chest. And it's tense because it's waiting for the next bomb to drop. It's waiting for the next injury, for the next harm, for the next issue. So the breath, the subtle energy of the breath is directly impacted by the way trauma has touched the different parts of your body. And in yoga, we know this. And for those of you online who are yoga teachers, I invite you to put something in the comments about your own understanding of the relationship between the breath and the body as it associates with trauma. And I don't know, Carrie, maybe you're listening out there, you work with this directly. Trish, maybe you're out there, you work with this also directly, And so maybe putting a little note there for individuals to support their understanding. And I'll put a little something there later too about the fact that this upper chest breathing is not the ideal breath. The breath draws itself down to the lower lungs. It enters into the habit of diaphragmatic breathing, which supports all the organs of the body. It supports the intestines. It supports the liver, the stomach, the spleen, the gallbladder. It supports the kidneys, the adrenals. It supports the heart, the lungs. It supports the circulation of appropriate energy in the body. And when the body is circulating appropriately, then what ends up happening is the individual feels lighter, healthier, more healed. But if we're living in our trauma and our tissues are clenched, we cannot have that breath of positive circulation. Maybe with one exception. We feel discomfort in the body. We acknowledge that trauma exists in the body, that there's an echo of everything from the past in our muscles, in our cells, in our molecules. And we begin to breathe on purpose. We breathe in and we breathe out on purpose. And we pay attention to the breath. And we get accustomed to what our patterns are, our long-held patterns. We pay attention to that. And little by little, through the yoga practices, we begin to shift, to alter, to move from a state of sympathetic breathing, breathing that is more inclined toward fight, flight, or freeze. And slowly we shift ourselves toward a state of breathing in the parasympathetic, which is a deeper breath, a slower breath, a calmer breath, a breath that is more in line with diaphragmatic breathing. And over time, maybe we are even able to sit with great discomfort in our body and still maintain a breath that is calm, consistent, and therefore maintain a mind that is also calm and consistent. And in yoga, one of the teachings are that when we are able to do that without force, when we are able to maintain a breath that is calm, consistent, potentially diaphragmatic, then we are able to heal on a deep level. The entire journey is a healing journey, but control of the breath itself is considered the path of healing. Now, there are people out there, and I always like to talk about all sides of all thoughts. There are people who say, well, you shouldn't manipulate the breath, because when you manipulate the breath in an individual who is stuck in their trauma, you're not dealing with the trauma. And I agree with that. It's not an overnight process. It's not like I'm going to sit here and right now I'm going to force myself to breathe diaphragmatically. Breathe in, bloat that belly. Breathe out, contract that belly back. Make that happen. No, that's just another trauma. It has to start with the inquiry. It has to begin with the inquiry. It needs to begin with us understanding that we even want to heal and what that healing might look like. And then understanding how our life traumas, no matter how small, how big, how grand, how horrible, how bearable, how those traumas touched each and every part of our being. You know, can I hold my hand without it shaking? Did my trauma touch me there? Can I meet somebody with an eye-to-eye contact? Or did my trauma touch me there? Can I sleep through the night? Or did my trauma touch me there? And then when we recognize where our trauma has touched us, then we begin to unwind a little bit at a time, using the breath as one of our vehicles. So why in yoga do we pay so much homage to the breath? What's the big deal? My God, we all breathe in and out. It's nothing special. Well, it's actually very special. The breath is the carrier of the prana. The breath is the vehicle that the prana comes in and out of the body. It's not the only vehicle, but it is the most accessible vehicle. You look through your eyes and you see colors. You see forms, you see shapes. You close your eyes, you most likely don't see so much of that. It's okay. You won't start freaking out necessarily unless you lose your eyesight permanently, and then you'll have a time of traumatic reform, but you will ultimately be okay. You breathe in, you breathe out. You breathe in, you hold your breath a little bit. You breathe out, you hold your breath a little bit. You're okay. You breathe out and you don't breathe anymore, you will not be happy. You will start to panic. You will do everything you can to capture that breath. You will do everything you can to begin to breathe again. Because on a subconscious level, you understand that that breath is life. That without that breath, you cannot live. You can live without your sight. You can live without taste, without touch, without smell. It's challenging, sure. It's got its own perils, but you can still live. You cannot live without your breath. It's not possible. Yet we take it for granted every single day. When we come into yoga, it is a practice of no longer taking it for granted. When we come into yoga, breathing becomes an offering and a receiving. An offering and a receiving of what? Of prana. Breathing becomes an offering of prana and a receiving of prana. But let's talk about the receiving first. It is the receiving of a gift of life. And then it is the expression of that life. But first, we need to know that we want to express it. And we need to understand how we want to express it. On some level, we need to understand, to consider how we wish to express the gift of life, the gift of prana. And then investigate the ways to do so. We receive the life, we express the life. It's more than just being alive, though. It's more than just like, okay, I'm breathing in and out, and I'm a human, and, I've got impulses, and I've got experiences. It's more than just checking off the boxes of experience. There's something more to it. There's something much more to this breathing in and this breathing out. It's more than just regulation of our nervous system. It's more than that. What is it? It's connection. In the simplest of terms, it's unity. It's that you breathe out and I breathe in, I breathe out and you breathe in. It's that the tree breathes out and we breathe in. We breathe out and the tree breathes in. It's that the breath in is the receiving, the connection, the unity with the universe, with God, with Goddess, with each other, with all that is. And the breath out is our offering of that connection to all other beings everywhere. Like our breath out is saying, I am not going to be an obstacle between you and unity, or between me and unity. Breathing in, I accept the responsibility. And breathing out, I am able to respond. Breathing in, I receive the gift of life. And breathing out, I allow all others to live. Breathing in, I'm compelled toward humility because the breath is so powerful. And breathing out, I will maintain humility and not come at you in violence. Not come at myself in violence. Instead, I'll just breathe. There's a beautiful painting out there. I'm not really sure who did it, but it's a person. It's kind of an abstract person, and they're sitting. I think they're sitting cross-legged, and they're breathing, and there's a swirl of the breath, and they're kind of breathing up into that swirl, up into that beautiful, beautiful mystery of, the sacred. They're receiving the breath and they're giving the breath. They're receiving and they're offering. They're sharing. There's a word, sharing. We share our breath. Breath is shared. Unity is shared. Love is shared. Life is shared. Everything is shared. Prana is a great sharing. Prana is a great sharing. It is a great sharing of all that is sacred. It is a great sharing of all that is divine. Prana is a great sharing of life, of healing, and of liberation. So our talk today is a discussion of prana and healing. But the first thing that we need to acknowledge on some level is whether or not we really want to heal. Are we really interested in that? Does it matter to us? Sometimes we say, I just want to be better, feel better. I just want life to be okay. And we have to draw, little lines and pull things apart a little bit and look between the words, between the sentences, and read into that. Are we saying that we're actually willing to commit to the change necessary in order to be a happier person? Are we actually willing to do that? Or are we just talking? Talk. And if we are saying, yeah, I'm sick and tired enough, I am willing to change. In my own life, I very clearly remember the moments where change was the greatest and where healing became abundant, because those were the moments that I was so sick and tired of pain. And I was so sick and tired of suffering. And I was so sick and tired. I was done, But I wasn't done in a hopeless way. I wasn't done like, I give up. No, I was done. I was done. Like, that's it. No more. Not going to happen. This has to change. Now, what do I have to do? I don't want to be that miserable person anymore. I don't want to be that horrible person anymore. I don't want to be that hurtful person anymore. I don't want to be that person anymore, because that is not who I really am. So, who am I? That's got to be the next logical question. And we don't get that answer immediately. It's not like someone can just come up and, tap you on the shoulder and you're like, oh, okay, there you go, I'm all better now. No. Nope. You need to investigate piece by piece, bit by bit. It's a process that takes a long time. That's why we get so many lifetimes. It takes lots and lots of time. You are made up of millions, trillions of cells, molecules. Every single one has been touched by your trauma. And every single one of those cells, every single one of those molecules receives and gives back prana, exchanges prana, has prana flowing through it. And for us, one of the primary ways that prana moves is through our breath. So when our breath is tied up in our trauma, then there's some part of our matrix of being that is not receiving what it needs, because we're too constricted, too tightly wound. So we need to begin to unwind, even into the unknown. Well, I don't really know who I am. I don't really know what I want. I just know that I'm sick and tired of being something that I'm not. So I'm going to start investigating. I'm going to start breathing more mindfully, even if it's only for 1 or 2 seconds at a time. I'm going to call myself back to it. I'm going to recognize that there is life force coming in with each breath in, and there is life force moving out with each breath out. And the life force that comes in is never diminished, and the life force that goes out is never diminished. It's just an exchange. And it's the most miraculous and beautiful exchange that there has ever been. And I'm going to honor that exchange with humility, with dignity, with grace, with care, with nurturance, with devotion. I'm going to accept the prana. I'm going to offer the prana. I'm going to make the exchange over and over and over again, with more and more humility and more dignity and more ethic and more love and more love and more love. And then ultimately somebody will say, oh, but wait a minute. What about when something bad happens? What about when something traumatic happens next week? In yoga, the answer to that is basically we're not in next week, we're in this moment. And whatever you're afraid of happening next week isn't happening right now. So don't worry about it. Why are you investing in something that isn't even here? That's like investing in bad stocks. No one knowingly invests in bad stocks unless they have a strategy. Yeah. So don't spend your time worrying about things that aren't happening. Bring yourself back to the breath. Bring yourself back to the sacredness of that exchange. Bring yourself back to recognition that the breath is moving in and out, and that breath is connecting you with all other people, with all other beings, with all that is, with the God, with the goddess, with yourself. That breath is connecting you with yourself. And then be brave. Be brave, be courageous to investigate that relationship. It's not a journey for the weak of heart, for the weak of mind. It's not a journey for someone who is weak. It's a journey for the strong, for the brave, for the courageous. It's easy to fall off. It's just as easy to get right back on again. Because for as long as you're alive in this life, you will not stop breathing. The breath will always be there for you. You might stop seeing. You may lose your sight. You may lose something else. But you will not lose your breath until your work here is done. And when your work in this round is done, then the breath will stop. But don't worry about not getting your work done, because inherently your work will be done in this life. And you'll know it's done because it's time to stop breathing. And then, at some future life, if you adhere to the idea of reincarnation, you'll come back again. And you'll do some other work. And then when that work is completed to the extent that it's meant to be completed, you'll stop. And then you'll come back again and again and again and again. You're not meant to do everything in this life. That would be a very long list and a very busy life. For some, they will do it all in this life. They're very few and far between. If anybody ever tells you, I'm good, I'm healed, I'm done, you better run. Because they've just given up on the inquiry. Everyone has work to do. Everyone. So I'll open it up there to questions. Anybody online has questions they would like to ask, or anybody in the room with me has questions they would like to ask, or comments that they would like to make. Or should I just keep talking? So do you see the relationship between the prana and healing? Is everybody good with that? Yeah? And everybody's clear that prana is, we call it life force. It's actually a bit more than that. It could be consciousness itself. The flow of prana is the flow of consciousness. And that the prana moves through the body. And that the breath is not the only way it moves. That we receive prana through the eyes, through the ears, through the nose, through the mouth, through the skin. We receive prana through the senses. And that's why cultivation of our senses is so very important in yoga. We receive prana through the senses. So there's a difference between watching a movie that is full of violence and hate and perhaps watching a documentary about, love. Or just going out and looking at the night sky. That's the greatest show on earth, off earth. That's the greatest show off earth, the night sky. There's a difference between listening to music that causes you to feel tense, tight, angry. And music that opens and allows and fills. The prana moves through all things everywhere without exception. And we can get caught in conversations about low frequency vibrations and high frequency vibrations, but prana doesn't have a low or a high frequency. Prana is prana. Consciousness is consciousness. The question is, how tightly wound are you that you can or cannot identify on some level with the consciousness? And when we are tightly wound, then we're listening with anger, or acquiring anger, or feeling anger, or hate, or something along those lines. And then the expression of the consciousness that is moving through us will be a low quality and a harmful one. But when we're a little less wound, when we have more circulation, when we have more accessibility, when we are more accessible to that consciousness, then the expression of that consciousness through our life and through our action has a higher vibration. Does that make sense? Yeah. It's not the prana that has the problem. It's us. It's like we're either willing to or we're not. It's that we're either open and in the flow, or we're not. But what about my neighbor? What about that jerk? You know? The one who irritates me all the time. Every time I walk out of my house, he gives me a mean look. He doesn't have a problem. If you're saying that about him, you have a problem. His prana is no less or more than yours. All prana is the same. The difference is in the expression. Well, isn't his expression low vibration? Isn't his vibration lower than mine? I mean, here I am just trying to be nice to the guy, waving to him, and all I get is a grunt. It's not up to us to judge the quality of his vibration. It's only up to us to interact with the quality of our own. Yes, Cal?
I think it's becoming more clear with what you've recently been saying here, but could you define prana?
Define prana?
Yes.
Kel has asked to define prana. So prana is simply put life force.
Okay, yeah.
Is simply stated consciousness. Prana is the essence in an acorn that allows that acorn to hold the energy of the tree it will turn into, grow into, and the energy of the 10,000 acorns that tree will produce. That's prana. Yeah.
Yeah, that's kind of originally the first thing this morning in the yoga class. My understanding was prana was our breath.
Yeah.
Strictly the breath. And I'm thinking there has to be something larger than our breath that causes the breath, basically, so to speak. So,
yeah.
okay.
And the breath is one vehicle.
Right.
Yeah. It's like the cab or the bus or the train. It's one vehicle that allows us to recognize the presence of prana. But the breath itself is not necessarily prana. The breath is a technical function. The sight is another vehicle that allows us to recognize the presence of prana. But we get caught up in all the flashy colors and the things that we like and don't like, and that we like to see or that we don't like to see. And because what we see is typically outside of ourselves, we begin to externalize and compare. And this is a little bit off of what we're saying, but then not really. And when I look at the bird, and there's a beautiful robin, There's a beautiful robin on the very top of the pine tree out the window right now. And when I look at that bird, I see such beauty. And I say, oh, that is beautiful. That is beautiful. And the more that I say that is beautiful, I begin to see that that is outside of me, that that is somehow separate from me. And I say, start making subconscious comparisons. Well, I'm not that beautiful. And then I see another bird come along. Maybe it's a vulture. And the vulture lands on the ground because it would not try to land on the top branch of the tree. And I look at the vulture, and if I'm not a person who appreciates vultures, I might look and say, oh, scary. Oh, that's not a beautiful bird. Personally, I love vultures, but most people don't. Most people look at them and think, oh, ugly. Ugly bird. And then something subconsciously happens, and we start to look at that bird as separate from ourselves. And we start to have a preference between the two birds. We prefer the robin, not the vulture. Some people prefer the vulture, not the robin. We start looking at the outside world, and when we see the robin, our breath will get a little bit deeper. It's a microscopic amount. It's so tiny, minuscule amount. Our breath will get a little deeper because that which we look at and perceive of as beautiful causes us to feel content at first. And we see the vulture and we get a little tight because that which we see through the eyes that causes us to feel uncomfortable causes us to lose our breath. The question is, can you see the beauty in both? Can you see God in both? Can you see the goddess in both? Goddess did not create the robin and say, well, just to gross you out, here's a vulture. No. They're all an expression of divinity. Every one of them. The problem is that we don't see correctly. We don't hear optimally. We don't speak optimally. We don't feel, touch optimally. We differentiate too much in areas where it doesn't matter. And what that ends up doing is it desensitizes us to the responses that we could be having that do matter. Does that make sense? Yeah, I don't want to go too much off on that, although I could easily. Yeah, so the way we use our senses wastes our energy because it does not allow us often to identify, to recognize, to have recognition of the flow of prana through ourselves, but also through all other things everywhere. And in that wastefulness, we become apathetic over time. Some people may say, well, I'm not apathetic. Sure you are. We're all apathetic in some way, shape, or form. We've all said, I don't care. What does my vote count anyway? What does my voice mean? No one listens to me. That's apathy. And we're apathetic because we fail to recognize, to have recognition of the sacredness, aka prana, that moves through all things everywhere without exception. If we really came into a full understanding, a full communion with that, do you know what this life would be? Like, could you imagine walking through your life every day from the moment you wake up until the moment you go to sleep and just recognizing everything? Everything. There's a movie, I think it's called Limitless. We've talked about it before, right? Yeah, a movie called Limitless. Wow, if you haven't watched it, watch it. It's amazing. Limitless. To see, to recognize, and to be limitless. But there's still harm in the world. Yes, there's still harm in the world. But you being able to identify or recognize your capacity to limitlessness means that you can now be empowered to have a more proactive response to the things in life that are harmful, to the occurrences that are harmful, you will be more empowered to bring forth the love that is necessary to heal. But first, you got to want to heal in and of yourself, which includes recognition of the prana in all things. Any other thoughts or questions? No, we're good? Okay. Everybody online looks good. I'm not getting any questions there. There could be a delay. If I find some later, I will put on a little response for you. Let's sit up nice and tall and close the eyes. Breathing in, breathing out. And don't concern yourself right now with the technique of your breathing. Just be aware of it, of the breath itself. Be aware of the prana. Breathing in, the consciousness moves in. Breathing out, the consciousness is moving. It's not leaving you. It's exchanging itself for more consciousness, for further consciousness. It's just moving. And your breath is that movement. We'll take 4 or 5 breaths in silence in honor of prana. And placing the hands together in front of the heart in Anjali Mudra. Together we'll lift our voices in one very prayerful Om. Take a nice breath in. Om. And bowing the head to the heart. Acknowledging all things everywhere as being integrals of this vast divine consciousness. Recognizing that unity comes together in the heart of our being and is also expressed from that place. Loka samasta sukhino bhavantu. May all beings everywhere find peace, love, light, and happiness. May all beings know their oneness. Om Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. Namaste. Thank you all so much for joining me today in this conversation. So good to see each and every one of you. Thank you to everybody on Facebook for joining in. So much love, so many blessings. Perhaps we'll do this again. Namaste. Okay, so now